Take this. Now I gotta turn my back.
$3,200. That's what he gave me. $3,200 for a lifetime.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and every once in a while, I like to bring my good friend Eric Breen here on the channel. He's been reading comic books longer than I've been alive, and I'm not a young man, people. I'm in my early 40s, so I don't want to give Breen's age away, but he is no spring chicken, and I like to talk about him. He's been through the good times, he's been through the bad times, he's persevered, he's still here reading comic books and loving the hobby. And sometimes I look at you, Eric, or we talk. I'm like, I don't know how you did it. Obviously, here with me to discuss all this is the man so cool. They call him the Breen. Eric Breen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Wes, and I don't hide my age. It's 58.
Wow, you're middle aged and crazy.
Thank you for at least attaching middle aged in front of that.
So before we get into all the details on what Eric Breen's still doing here, how he's persevered, how he feels about the industry, I do want to say, if you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this comment. Give me a thumbs down if you don't. Now, I know everyone likes Eric more than me. Please don't rub it in too hard in the comments, but we definitely want to hear from you guys on what your thoughts are on this conversation and just the general premise. Now, we talked, oh man, it must have been over a year ago about kind of how the industry, you felt the industry has been trying to push you out, and along with a lot of old school, old head readers that have been with comic books for decades upon decades, because they really just don't want readers like you anymore. They don't want old white guys to be their core audience. They want the trendier, cooler audience that all the everything that the younger folks are working on nowadays.
Yeah, well, it's not just comics. It's if you're my age, your demo starts with 55, 2, and then death,
infinity.
Yeah. So I'm out of every market metric that is considered desirable, which is kind of other than life insurance and retirement investment. But so it's the industry wants to get younger. I mean, that makes sense. You always have to replenish the people that people are going to age out. You have to find somebody to replace them with. My only problem through the years is it seems like they didn't get the audience. They didn't have my replacement secured before they ushered me out the door.
Well, I don't think it's just you because of your age. I think there's other mitigating circumstances that they don't really appreciate you. I don't think that they like that you're a man. I don't particularly think that they like that you're a white man. And, with some open conservative values, although we've discussed things, you have some liberal leanings on your or provocations on your beliefs and stuff like that. I'm 42. I'm pretty young. I actually have 2 kids that the comic book industry would love to get their hands on and make them lifelong customers, and they want me gone, which I think is hilarious. But yeah, it's just a weird thing. I don't think it feels like the comic book industry, starting up from the executives, going down to the creators. I don't think it's the shops. I think it's just like the industry itself. They are not proud of who their core demographic is.
No, I think there's some truth to that. And I'm not exactly sure why. I understand that the industry is now dominated by people who have grown up with one set of beliefs, and they've been told that theirs is the only set of beliefs that could possibly be right. So they write like that. They legislate like that. So if you don't adhere to their beliefs or you don't agree with their positions, you're going to find the landscape shrinking for you. And I'm not sure that's a great business plan, because I would think in an industry that relies in any way, shape, or form on print, you can't go out and distance yourself from half of your customer base just because they don't agree with you politically.
Well, you're talking about theoretical customer base. If you talk about just think about their real customer base, it's probably more like 65% of their actual customers are white males.
Oh yeah, and again, you can't get rid of us without having someone to replace us with, and without us, the sales will continue to shrink. But and their problem is how do you get our replacements? And I think they've done a pretty poor job because the stuff they're giving you, if you don't have to be old and white to look at some of the stuff that's coming out and go, this really isn't for me.
No, one of my very good friends in the Navy. Well, he was in the Navy. I was in the Air Force. Back in the day, he was always reading graphic novels. We talk about comics. I hadn't really started reading yet. He's a black dude from Atlanta. When I finally started my channel, I was reading comics. I reached out to him on Facebook. I was like, hey, let's talk about comics. He goes, I stopped reading comics about 3 years ago. Why is that? He goes, the stories weren't very good. They were too expensive, and manga's just better. They're not just driving, the audience that they're not proud of. They're just driving a lot of the audience away, and that's why I think why we're kind of at where we're at right now.
Well, another problem is chasing a demo that's grown up with instant access to anything on their phones and tablets. How do you excite them with still images on a printed page or even digitally? It's still, you can't beat the video game experience. You can't beat the live action experience. So by its very nature, comics are going to skew older. And I would have thought that a more sound strategy would have been to keep their aging fan base around as long as possible while they're looking for ways to grow it to a new generation.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things I find strange. Like, I get that you have to go and grow your audience. You have to go find new readers and stuff like that. But really doing it at the expense of your core audience, your core consumer base, and they're not the first ones to do this. Professional wrestling has done the same thing. They've actually driven off, I think, was it like 75% of their audience from their peak days have actually exited. Maybe it's like 80%. They also, chased off all their customers trying to get a younger, more vibrant, cooler, hipper customer base. But it feels just weird that you would just all of a sudden stop writing stories that are going to be, for the most part, enjoyed by your core audience, and just it almost forced people out the door. And I'll never understand it.
I think it may, if it's not it may be as much by accident as by design. When I first started reading, the writers, maybe they had more life experience because you had to go out and live life to get to the point where you were. Now you can basically live life virtually. So you may not be as well read. The writers of the 70s.
Well, I mean, Jerry Conway was writing
just going to bring up
at like 19, and
right.
Jim Shooter was writing at DC at, I think, the age of 15, right?
Right, but they probably spent their leisure time reading books as opposed to surfing the net or playing video games on their phone, because none of that existed yet. So in some of the other writers a little bit before that may have military backgrounds. So if you go back to the early days of Marvel, a lot of them were World War II veterans. They had seen life. They'd been places, and it shaped their writing. Now, they may have had the liberal beliefs of the day, but they were very good at presenting both sides. They didn't want to tell you what to think. They wanted to present you with your options and let you make your own decisions. Now, that's not really the case any longer, as some of the people that have grown up, whether it's digitally or being maybe having their beliefs shaped for them as opposed to shaping their own beliefs. So they're just giving you what they know. And when you believe that you're the only one that could possibly be right, if you don't like what they're giving you, you're the problem. And for good or ill, that may be okay for some, but I read comics for a different reason for all these years. I like the hero's journey. I like the flashy costumes, just the fun. It was a very fun hobby for a lot of years. And and that fun was based on the weekly, output. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a kid, 14, it would have been January 1977. We had horrible winters for 2 years, and one year the river froze so much that people were driving across the river, and no one went to school for a month. Well, I knew the new comics were out, but my local places didn't get them. So it's about 5 degrees. I walked about in the snow up to the highway to take a bus downtown. From the terminal up the street, there was a news vendor on the side of the first. He had the new comics. I didn't know that because there was no way to call anybody in 1977 out on the street. So I was just hoping they were there. They were. Gathered up my 15 or so comics, got back on the bus, trudged home, and was in heaven for the next week. I must have read those books, 5 times a piece because there was nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I can't see that being the case for anybody anymore. But
No,
once upon a time,
you have a whole generation that are used to like binging stuff on Netflix. But is there a specific time like where you noticed, like maybe Marvel or DC, were kind of ashamed that you were their reader, that they were no longer interested in specifically entertaining you?
Okay. I would say the Jamas era, when he
Bill
came
Jemas.
out, Jim Jemas, when he came out and said, "I'm not interested in continuity. I think continuity's for fanboys, and we don't care." That changed when Quesada took over, and we got 5 or 6 what I consider really, really good years. All new, all different, which I think started gaining steam in 2012. I would say from that point to the present, yes. I don't think anything.
So before, you think they held you in contempt because you like comics too much. They're like, you shouldn't worry about the continuity. You should just read it because it's Marvel. And now you think that it kind of switched over to where you didn't meet the right criteria. Your gender was wrong. Your race was wrong. Your ethnicity, all those things that they didn't. We need diversity. So in the name of diversity, we need to force people that have been liking that don't meet those criteria out.
Well, let's just say I'm not their preferred demographic, be it my age, be it my gender, be it my whatever reason. They've I guess in their mind they've made their money off of me already, and if they continue to make money off of me, that's good. They'll take it, but they're not gonna. The monthly output is no longer being created hoping I will. I mean, if I do, great. If not, I don't know that they care.
You know what's weird? Like, I think comic books are the best storytelling medium available. But I don't know that comic books, I mean, I guess in some ways, if you look at some of the independent, it certainly, if you're a good creator and you're able to tell a nice cohesive story, you can tackle a lot of the elements or push agendas that they're trying to do at Marvel and DC, and you can do it appropriately and effectively. But I think for the most part, when you think about superhero comics, I just don't think they lend themselves as a medium to getting those messages out there effectively. And, it just ends up becoming pretentious garbage when you're trying to read a superhero comic. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, we talked about that. I said at some point the heroes went from selfless to self-impressed, or self-insert
the writers. They're all very self-impressed.
Well, I said, Batgirl 50 was a textbook example of that. So I mean, the industry itself might be moving away from the new industry might be moving away from people like me. But I will say, to the credit of both of these companies, Marvel,
the retailers are certainly still there for you. I'll give them that.
Let's say now, back to the original premise. Why I'm still excited about comics. both Marvel and DC do still have a trade department and omnibuses, epic collections, masterworks, things like that. I think it's in January. There's an epic collection coming out with the first 23 issues of Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, then Luke Cage Power Man, starting with issue 17. I could not be more excited. I mean, I cannot wait for that. I love those stories. I had them as a kid. I'd like to get them back, but issue 1 has gone through the roof in price. So this is my chance to get all those stories back. There's a Hulk epic collection coming out in March with 20 issues from the 130s through the 150s. So the industry, at least somebody in the industry, is still thinking about my demographic. Maybe not in the monthlies, but with collections, they know that it's sort of like in the music industry when you get that 50th anniversary edition of Black Sabbath Paranoid. They know the only way they're going to get somebody of a certain age is to keep hitting them in their eras. And to their credit, they are still doing that. And that's what, keeps me, excited about this industry.
But, I mean, you're not only reading trades. You read Batgirl 50. You're keeping up with a lot of Batman or DC stuff.
Sure.
I mean, we talked about this. Was it last week? Maybe the week before. We were talking about how you kind of gave up Marvel comics. I read a lot of DC. I read a lot of Marvel. Now, I don't read everything. I'll be honest. I don't want to blackpill myself by reading every bad comic book on the market. But there are a couple of them that I know I'm not going to enjoy that I do read for reviewing purposes on the channel. DC's just as bad as Marvel right now. It might be a little bit worse. As far as the way that they're going with a lot of their characters. It's like character assassination out left and right. They're pushing a lot of different agendas right now as far as social commentary. And they're not just like including them in the stories. They're front and center. They are the story right now with a lot of their comic books, But you're still buying them.
Well, I'm still buying the Bat books, Justice League, the Justice League books, Flash, some of the death metal stuff. I did read 3 Jokers. I guess DC up until very recently, their mistakes were still being made in the comic book vein. That I might not like story direction, but it didn't feel agenda driven. That is starting to change. And again, I don't want to come off as someone that says, it's got to be for me or F it, because that's how the people that are trying to drive me out are treating me. So if they want to make comics in a direction that I don't care to go with them on, then I will politely excuse myself and I will retreat back into. See, the great thing about this hobby is there's 80 plus years of stories to find, to read, to reread. And there's always the chance that the new output will come back around. The chance of that at my age are probably not as good as they might be for someone 20 years younger. But there's always a chance that Marvel will, that their main superhero line will be good across the board again. DC, could be again, as long as it's character first and not if it's adventure before agenda, the books will still be okay. It's when it makes that final transition and flips, that's when there'll be nothing left.
But I honestly feel like where we're at with DC is they finally flipped, and I don't know. It's still about like right now. I think just looking at like the comic books I really enjoy, it's like 3-1 indies to big 2 comics. I wish people would watch indie reviews here on the channel and independent news, comic news, because it just they don't seem to want it as much, but I enjoy it so much more. There just isn't much at Marvel or DC right now that has me like even excited. It's like There's like a handful of issues there, but there's so much more on the independent market. And everyone keeps telling me, man, you got to go read manga. And I have read some manga, but I'm almost thinking maybe I should be reading as much manga as I am comic books at this point.
Well, there's a lot out there, but again, it's what you're looking for. You know, I used to read a lot of manga, and I liked it. I Battle Royale is one of my favorite stories of all time. But there's part of the reason why we got into comics is we like the capes. We love Superman. We love Spider-Man, Batman, Captain America. Now, the storytelling in manga is outstanding, but it's almost like if you don't like seafood, I don't care how well the shrimp is prepared, you're not going to like it. Or if it's not your favorite, and this industry, nothing's really inexpensive unless you have the Shogun,
Shonen app.
Shonen app. But there's only if you don't already like manga, it's hard to get people to. It's a hard transition from superheroes if that's why you were into comics in the first place. If you were just in it for the type of storytelling, it's a much easier transition. And I've done
I like sci-fi and horror and fantasy just as much as I like capes.
But I started reading comics when I was 13. I'm 58 now, and I'm still enjoying what I read as much as ever, and the pursuit of things in this industry as much as ever. Because no matter how long you're in this, I recently found on Amazon, and I don't know how I found it, a company there's a horror company called Skywald in the early 70s. They were a competitor of the creepy, eerie Vampirella stuff from Warren. And they had books called Psycho, Scream, and Nightmare. They lasted for 2 or 3 years and then went out of business. Well, they lapsed into the public domain. And a company assembled them all, printed them up, and are reprinting 260-page, 4-issue blocks of these books for $15.
Amazing.
And you can't find an issue of those books those magazines in good condition for under 20 or 30. And finding something like that in 2020, the first thing it says, my wallet said, "Oh crap, where's that padlock?" And so as long as the industry still has things like that, that's how somebody my age can still be passionate about it. And when you're passionate about the hobby as a whole, it's easier to get re-energized with the new stuff.
Absolutely. I get duped all the time. Like, oh, that sounds great. Donny Cates crossover? A crossover coming into our world? What could be more exciting? Donny Cates is, one of the hottest writers, and you get in there and you're like, he got me again. Oh. But they're still going to get me. They're still going to sucker me and get me back. I'm just like you, Eric. I'm not giving this up anytime soon. I love my channel. I love my viewers. I love talking to guys like you here on the channel. And that's really what my passion is right now. Because it's certainly not with the stories coming out of DC and Marvel. Because quite frankly, there's just some good ones out there. For the most part, it's lackluster.
I was going to say the best thing that happened to the decline in quality in the comic book industry was the rise of comic book YouTube. And I've met a ton of great people. All my life as a reader, I wanted to have a group of people that I could talk about comics with. I guess I had to wait for the technology to catch up. Kind of like when I saw the first Spider-Man TV show, I had to wait a quarter century to see what it could really look like. Unfortunately, yes, if the industry had stayed vibrant, you guys may never have hit the air, and I wouldn't have met any of you guys. Now I have, and it's unfortunate it's come at the expense of a lot of quality in the industry. Maybe that can reverse itself, and it can be the best of both worlds again.
That's what I would like. Well, Eric, I do want to say thank you for coming here on the channel, kind of talking about the industry. I think it's quite apparent the industry does not love me. If they could get rid of me, they would be happy to. And, I don't think they're very fond of you either. But we are enduring, and we're still here, Eric.
Yes, we are.